Okie dokie. Shrink some stuff. Alright, minimize this, make sure that's still showing. Yeah, okay. I'll leave that up right there. Okay, let me get this pulled up on my side over here. Good afternoon, folks. Trying to get everything to go live here. Yeah, there we go. We're going to pop in there and screen that bad boy. We'll turn it down a little bit. The wireless go big. There we go. See if that sits. Wow, what you said. There we go. Okay. Alright, so did a couple of videos. This is going to be a part 4 video of some various things that EA Sports could pull from the NHL series to help out the Madden franchise series. And this is focusing mainly on online franchise, not necessarily offline, although these things could definitely work in an offline environment. This is mainly for online franchise, and today we're going to focus for the most part strictly on coaches. I will do a separate video on scouting because it can get really detailed and robust, and I want to show off the system and what I think it could do for Madden. I have heard talk on a good note excuse me, that Madden 22, it looks like it's going to be revamping its scouting system, which is sorely needed. But I want to show how maybe some ideas from the NHL franchise could help with that. But that's for another video. This video is going to be strictly about coaching. And we know from some leaked video from Madden 22 that coaching staffs look like they're just about 100% going to be in the game. That can bring some trepidation for online commissioners. But fret not, I'm hoping that maybe the guys at Madden looked at the template that was in place at one of their sister studios up there in Vancouver and took a look at how the coaching system was implemented in NHL. Now, NHL's coaching staff has only been around since, I want to say, almost said Madden, NHL 19. It came and was introduced with NHL 19. And it hasn't changed much since implementation, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. It's a good system. It's not elite in my opinion, but it is a solid foundation to build off of if the team in Vancouver for NHL decides to build off of it. So what you see here is you see head coach, associate coach, assistant coach, goalie coach, and then you have an AHL, head, assistant, associate assistant, and goalie coach. To give you an idea, for those of you that aren't familiar with hockey at all, essentially the NHL has a head coach, 2 assistant coaches, and then a goalie coach, so 4 coaches total in the professional side. And in the minor league side, you also have the same setup of 4 individuals there for basically your minor league affiliate. So you have a total of 8 coaches under you. And it's nice because in this particular setup, I currently have, this is my franchise I run. I finished the first year of a expansion franchise. So you're seeing these coaches that I have here. The main things I want to focus on this screen is, let me push myself to the back temporarily so you guys can see the corner here. I want you to see the number there. The staffing salary is the main thing I want to focus on. It shows 4.107 out of 4.75 million. And the main reason I want to bring that up is because even an offline franchise, this number is what will show up. In other words, I can't exceed this number. That 4.75 million is budgeted even if I was not in owner mode, which I'm not currently in. You can play in owner mode. I choose not to. It's not the funnest experience in my opinion. Could be better. But as far as this staffing salary is concerned, I have 8 coaches and I can spend a total of 4.75 million on all 8 of them. So to kind of assuage fears of folks worrying about, owners will just go and spend a ton of money to get the best coaches available, so that way they're covered in all aspects. Well, you can't really do that because the salary system will not allow you to. There is no way, to my knowledge, to turn that off. Now, in scouting, you can go over, which I'll talk about that in the scouting video, but with coaching staffs, you cannot go over that 4.75. It does increase slightly year over year, just like your cap does, but it doesn't go very much higher. So you really have to be judicious about how you spend money on your coaching staff. You can see I've got about $1 million put in towards my head coach. I got almost $1 million in my associate coach, about $600,000 in my third string coach, and I got about $130,000 in my goalie coach. And I got a little bit down here as well. It all adds up to $4.107 million. And that in and of itself is nice because you essentially have a salary cap for your coaches. You can't just go out and hire the latest and greatest best coaches. Another thing you can't really do because the game doesn't really have it in place. And by the way, just to specify, none of these are real coaches. These are all fictional coaches. I know Madden has an official license with the NFL Coaches Association, so you'll see like the head coaches for the most part, excepting the New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick. He's not in the game, but everybody else is in the game at this point. But I wanted to mention these are made up coaches. There are no real coaches in this game, which is fine. In my opinion, that's fine. I personally, in that aspect, I don't care about that level of realism. If Madden could do that, or if NHL could do that, that would be awesome. But it's not something I require personally. Now, that might just be me. That's fine. But these are all made-up coaches. And the nice thing is that I can scroll through, and they have contract years just like everybody else. I'm going to bring myself back to the forefront since you guys have seen that enough, I think. So there we go. I'll put myself back up here. Put my ugly mug back up here. Now, coaches have their own morale system. You can make them happy or unhappy during the year with performance and things like that. So just like players, your coaches can have morale. I like that. Especially if you're playing even though this is not technically owner mode, this makes you feel more like a general manager because you're having to manage personalities not only of players but also of coaches. But you'll see I'm going to scroll through, and I'm just going to bounce to the end here because each coach has 6 distinct attributes, and I'm going to go into my head coach right now to kind of show it off a little bit. You have offense, defense, power play, and penalty kill, which essentially is special teams in the NHL. You have a teaching attribute. You have a coach influence, which I believe is simply affecting penalties on the ice, your players as far as how well they perform for you, things like that. So you can see my coach is an A in offense, B in defense, B minus, B, B, and C, going from left to right, top to bottom. You also see experience points. Now, these are not experience points that I can assign out personally. These are points that accrue over the season. I will be honest and say I'm not exactly sure how they accrue, how you get experience points. That's kind of a thing that I'm not familiar with personally. I've looked into it a little bit. I haven't found any information on specifically how you get these points, but my assumption would be pretty simple, is just by doing things like for offense scoring goals on 5-on-5, even strength in NHL parlance. Defense, preventing goals or not allowing a lot of goals, maybe allowing a certain number of goals or less per game. Maybe that increases your defensive attribute. Your power play and penalty kill are pretty self-explanatory. Successful power play opportunities, successful penalty kill opportunities would probably give you some experience there. Teaching, I would assume that would be at the end of season, maybe if players grow on your team and get higher potential, which I'll talk about in a second. I've talked about potential in previous videos, and I've mentioned that coaches can help in that attribute. That's where teaching comes in. Maybe if a player goes up in the attribute or up in potential, that would be an increase in your teaching experience. And then coaching influence, I would assume that would be the overall success of the team. Some of these I'm spitballing, some of these I'm making some logical assumptions on. But I have 6 distinct attributes, and I have no control over that. Basically, they grow independent of me unless I'm actually in there influencing the team as far as playing, manually playing games, which I don't do. You also notice on the left-hand side, he's got a teaching specialty, and his teaching specialty is defenseman. And you can read it. This is the thing I like about NHL is it does a lot of breakdowns on things. And I just noticed my screen is frozen. Let me see something here. There we go. Okay. Just Sorry about that. I just realized it was frozen. I looked down like, wait a minute, no, I'm not talking about this. Okay, so really quick, offense, defense, power play, penalty kill, teaching, coaching influence. I talked about it earlier. Now you can actually see it. Sorry, I missed that. Recording live, that's what happens. But on the left-hand side, you see teaching special defensemen, and like I was saying, I really like how EA, at least the NHL crew, I like how they define a lot of things, so you can kind of see exactly what's happening as you go. So this guy, I mean, it basically says point blank, this guy is specialty is teaching defensemen how to play the game. With his specialty plus his teaching attribute can determine if any defenseman on the team will go up or down in potential. Now, does that mean that not every that just defensemen go up? Well, according to this guy, the head coach, yes. But that's where your associate coaches come into play. And I'm going to bounce to those really quick because my two other associate coaches are good with forwards. And as you can see, this Jackson Barlow guy, he's a really good teacher. And he also can help out with offense and defense. He's not near as good as my head coach. And I'm going to flip back and forth just to kind of show you. You can see my associate coach is not near as good as my head coach in some areas. But he's really actually better than my head coach at the penalty kill. He's also better at teaching, and he's also got just about as much coach influence. And you can see, looking at his numbers, you can see that he helps teach forwards on my team. Let's see here. Man, okay, well, I'll keep that up then. All right, so you can see forwards. Let's see if it changes. Okay, that's what I forgot. I just minimized that window, so I just need to keep that up. All right, cool. So you can see this is my second associate coach, Connor Sharp. He's not near as good as teaching forwards as Mr. Barlow is, but he's still an adequate guy that can basically help be a backup there. He is the third string coach, so that's why he's a little bit less quality. And then finally, my goalie coach is focused solely on goalies. And as you can see right there, he has a teaching of A, so he can help my goalies develop or go up in potential based upon their skill set. And then also, this is my AHL head coach. You can see his teaching is not very great, but he's also a defensive-minded head coach. Generalist, this is the other guy I wanted to bring up real quick. Essentially, this is a guy that can help grow any player on my team. He's not a very good teacher, as you can see, C-, but he's also an AHL coach. So you do have some give and take there because your AHL coaches typically don't have as good of grades as your NHL coaches will. There's another defenseman coach. And then finally, my goalie coach in the AHL, as you can see, he's a B-. So he's not the greatest goalie teacher for young guys in the AHL. He is 55, though, so he might be retiring soon, or I might just let him go. Which, by the way, you can fire any of these head coaches at any time. You can let them go, and then you can go into the pool and pick up new coaches, which I'll show you here in just a second. But as you can see from this menu, I can go hit the options button, and I can jump in and I can hire coaches. And this is a list of every coach in the NHL that's available. And I emphasize the term available because if I flip to look at the types of coaches, if I wanted to hire an NHL head coach, at this point, there are no coaches that are worth or value themselves enough to be an NHL head coach. Now, there are some that value themselves enough, a few, to be an NHL associate coach, which is essentially your second in command, your assistant coach. I say that because there is an assistant coach, but basically your associate coach is a second in command guy. And you can see they grade out B-, 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 and they have the same attributes as everybody else. They have the same 6 attributes. This guy's really good with a power play and good at teaching forwards, even though his teaching is C-, so that's not the greatest. But the main thing I want to go back to is my head coach. Now, this will only show up for head coaches the next couple of screens. In fact, I'll actually go to Jackson Barlow here, and I'll flip down, and you can see there's his morale. It actually has coach chemistry, so you can actually get coaches that work better with each other. So you can see player chemistry. So you not only are your coaches good with each other, but they're also good with certain players, and these can be players on other teams as well. And you can see coaching record. It does keep track of your wins and losses as a head coach and any awards that you've won, which I really like. As you get through the franchise, you can kind of see your coaches go up and down, the wins, losses, and then you can hire coaches, especially coaches that have been fired, because coaches, when NHL head coaches get fired during the season, you will see it as an alert. It'll tell you this team has fired this coach, and you can go look at the guy and you can see his wins, losses. and or girl, because there are female head coaches, which I kind of dig. But you can see this is all I see for a assistant or associate coach or goalie coach. However, if I go back up to my head coach, this is I'm currently on my head coach. When I hit down one more time, I now get some extra information because he's my head coach. And this is the stuff I want to focus on a good bit for this video. I'm going to take myself back down out of this so that way you can see the whole screen. Let me make sure I'm still, yep, I got to put this back on. There we go. Okay. Just want to make sure you guys see what I see. I don't want it to freeze up on you like it did last time, sorry. All right, so let's get back to Desmond Wester. Okay, so right here, this is one of the things I want to look at. And the main thing I want to focus on is, number one, defense. Basically, you coaches have different philosophies. I love that about the NHL. Now, I'm not saying there's a ton of different philosophies, so bear that in mind. I would like to see a lot more variety. But the fact that there's a few different ones compared to what I'm used to playing Madden, which has, well, nothing, I like this because essentially it tells you right there at a glance, defense. Coaches with a defensive scheme work best with defensive-minded players. Balanced players can make it work, while offensive players do not fit the scheme. Your players also have different things they do well, whether they're offensively minded, defensively minded, or somewhere in the middle. And you can see on the right-hand side, there's a roster scheme fit. And as a whole, this guy fits my roster 70%. And that's because he started with me in the franchise. He was my first head coach of this franchise. This is the end of the first year. So I've tried to get players that fit his scheme to the best of my ability. As you can see, though, I have made some misses because if you look like Beauvillier, the second one down, he's about 50%. Van Riemsdyk is about 40%. So there are some guys in here that aren't the greatest at doing things. But as I go down, you see guys like Zach Bogosian, Logan Johansson. Those guys have full roster scheme fits. They're defensemen, but they're also defensive players. They're defensive-minded players. You can, if you bounce your eyes up a little bit, Brendan Gould is a defenseman as well. So you would think, well, he's a defenseman. He'll like this guy. Not necessarily. You can see his roster scheme fits only about maybe 50%. And I'll get into that when I talk about players, but I'm about to go down even further and blow the mind maybe of Madden players with another thing I would love to see, and that's strategies. I would love to see you be able, now they introduced it to a slight degree with scheme fit. Okay, they introduced it with scheme fit, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. It's basically a band-aid over a system to make it look more have more depth, than it really has. What I really like about the team strategies is that everything you see here, for the most part, especially, would like you to focus on the penalty kill, which is on the middle row far right, and then bottom row far left, the power play. Those are different different strategies. I'll get the word out eventually. Different strategies for your special teams. Okay. And he also has a lot of different, like, offensive pressure, defensive pressure, forechecks. These are all basically concepts of how this coach operates on a time-to-time basis, whether he's 5-on-5, whether he's down a man, whether he's down 2 men, whether he's up a man, whether he's up 2 men. And also how much ice time he gives to his forwards, to his defense. Because some coaches will only play 3 lines. Even though you can make 4 lines, they will only play 3 lines as an AI. They basically will only roll out those first 3 lines. Their defense ice time might be just the first 2 defensive pairings because that's the only guys they trust. Those other guys are there just to kind of hold space. Okay? That's all good stuff that can work in. And this is not necessarily something that would be a one-to-one transfer to Madden, obviously. You'd have to make some changes. But this would be a great template for setting up how you want your coach to coach different parts of your team as a head coach. Keep in mind, your head coach is the only one that sees these things. He's the only one that you could adjust these settings for if you chose to change them for a created head coach. Any coach in here is locked in. I can't change these things. I can only go on a game-to-game basis inside a game if I'm playing and call different strategies. But as far as the game-to-game simulation basis, I can't change anything you see here. This is the way the coach coaches. I got to live with it. In Madden, I would love to see when you create a coach, you be able to manipulate things like this. And obviously, like I said, this is not a one-for-one transfer to Madden. So a lot of these concepts definitely don't work to Madden. But think about maybe, offensive bias. Do you pass more? Do you run more? Are you balanced? Is it 60-40? Is it 70-30 one way or the other? How do you view your offensive line? What type of offensive lineman do you like? What type of wide receivers do you like? And go, bam, bam, bam. And this kind of ties into the next screen, what I'm talking about now, and that is your coach, depending on what line you have out there, has different strategies. Now, I want you to kind of lock this in for a second, because it's important to note that this is what the coach views for each of my 4 lines that I can throw out there and each of my 3 defensive pairs that I throw out there. They have different views for different sets of line mates. Now, I want you to look at this because each line, you notice, lines 1 and 3 both have a strategy of behind the net, okay? Again, this is not something that could translate one-to-one to Madden. You'd have to kind of manipulate it to fit a football aspect. But the template's here for you to be able to do things like this. Because as you can see, the coach has different biases based upon certain aspects of the game. So like carry or dump. Do you basically skate the puck in? Do you dump it in by basically just launching it in the air into a corner and go after it? Cycle shoot. Do you pass the puck around, or do you just, as soon as it's on your stick, do you take a shot? Efficiency versus energy. Are you high energy, skate, 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 or are you conserving your energy? Hey, let's hold back. Let's not expend a lot of energy. Let's save it for key moments. And then blocking or not blocking shots. Do you want your players to lay down on the ice and block a puck, or do you not want them to? And obviously, there's 2 extremes, and then there's balance, which is in the middle. Perfectly fine. Nice little system, and it works. And the reason I want you to kind of lock this into memory cycles here for a second is I'm going to exit out, okay? Because I need to go to the players now. And what I want to do is I want to show you how it all ties together, okay? Edit lines. You remember those line 1, 2, 3, and 4 strategies that coach had? Line 1 strategies, line 2 strategies, line 3 strategies, line 4 strategies. If you look on the right-hand side, you will see, and I'm not in the way, so this is actually perfect. You'll see different check marks or X's or lines, okay? And that corresponds to how well a player's individual desires match up with the coach's desires. I will go into Mr. Beauvillier right now. He's an 82 overall second line forward. That's his role. He's top 6 potential, okay? Great little player, 23 years old. Good solid skills and attributes throughout. Here we go. So, the player. Look at the player preference. Every player has his own personal preference as to what he likes to do on a particular team. Okay? Now note it only shows carry dump bias, cycle shoot bias, efficiency energy, and block block shots bias. In other words, it only shows 4 things. There were 5 things on the coach though. The 5th one was the line strategy. But I can see the 4 of the 5 on this player and what they like. And at a glance, I can see a lot of things from this player screen. The first thing I can see is how well he meshes with what the coach wants for that line. I want to emphasize that, for that line. Because this line, the coach wants a balanced play for carry and dump. He wants you to shoot whenever you can. He wants energy, energy, energy. And he's balanced as far as whether he block or don't block shots. So basically, pick your poison situation. Okay? And as you can see, my player, if it's green with the check mark, 100%, we are simpatico. So balanced and energy are green. That's good. Red is bad. That means that the coach and I have 2 totally different thought processes on what we should do here. I want to cycle and pass. He wants me to shoot. I'm not terribly comfortable in this. The yellow represents 1 step off the track. So the coach wants balance. This guy wants to block shots. It's not totally out of nature, but it's also not totally within the coach's compatibility range. And then on the far right, you see scheme fit lines. you can see on this first line that I currently have him on, he's got about 50% compatibility. But if you look just down below at line 2, where he was for most of the season, by the way, he's got a lot more compatibility. So what I want to do is I'm going to move him down to the second line real quick. And I want you to look at the line chemistry on the right-hand side. It's +1 right now. I'm going to swap, and if you notice, my line 2 chemistry jumps up to a +1, while my line 1 stays at +1. And if you look on the right-hand side, you can see Beauvillier line fit. In other words, I'm swapping him. The line he's currently on is on the left, and the line he's going to is on the right. So at a glance, I can look and see by moving him to this second line, he's still happy with the carry dump. He becomes happier. In fact, he becomes simpatico with the coach as far as the cycle shoot. Now, the efficiency energy gets knocked a tick. The don't block shots stays the same, but the offensive strategy also changes. So let me flip him, and now I'm going to look at him. And you can see instead of that red that showed up earlier, now I've got 2 greens and 2 yellows, which means that now this player is much more comfortable in the role I have him in and the line I have him on. And this is something definitely that could go over to Madden. Having a coach that desires certain types of players in certain types of positions, and then have the player have their own preference about what positions they desire and what things they like to do, would be awesome, and create that engaged environment where now you're looking at players as actual people rather than just AI manipulations. This guy no longer feels like just a picture slapped on that's basically an AI representation of Anthony Beauvillier. This guy now feels more like a real person, because now as I move him around, he starts to like where I put him at more. And by liking where I put him at more, his morale goes up, and by his morale going up, his performance can potentially go up. And if his performance goes up, we start winning, then his morale goes up. It starts to become a snowball effect. And things like that could easily be translated to Madden. This is something that could be easily translated to Madden. And you could even use those archetypes, those crude archetypes that are in the game right now. For example, power, speaking offensive lineman, power, agile, balanced. I think that about covers it. I think it was just power, agile, balanced. I think that's all it was. Can't remember if there was anything. Oh, pass protection. There's pass protection now. That's right, they added pass protection. But those archetypes, you could easily kind of branch those out and further extend those to be things like, maybe prefers, like, for as far as scheme fits, instead of scheme fits for offensive linemen, maybe just left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle, and have a comfort zone of where this player plays. So kind of take that visual. Take that line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, take a offensive lineman. Now, I realize I'm kind of plugging here, but just follow me for a second as I take my picture away so that way you can see it a little bit. Let me grab out of the picture here. Okay? But as you can see, okay, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, let's pretend that's left guard, left tackle, left guard, right tackle. We'll eliminate center because there's only 4 spots there. Okay, so just kind of roll with me. If I was looking at this and I was looking at an offensive lineman, what this would tell me is that this offensive lineman I have is most comfortable at the left guard position, that line 2 spot. Because remember, it's left tackle, top, left guard, right tackle. So this player would be most comfortable at left guard. He would be less comfortable but still adequate at right tackle. He'd be a little less comfortable but okay at left guard, and he would be at best average at left tackle. That's instantly some depth that I can look at in an instance and go, you know what? Now I know where I want to plug this offensive lineman. And by moving him around, I could see things like maybe he prefers to push out and get after guys as far as in the blocking schemes. Maybe he prefers to. Maybe he's a run blocking guy that just loves to get a quick first step and jab. That would make him suited for a guard style position. So that way, that would kind of tell you that left guard spot. But maybe he's also a guy that's got good feet, so that makes him adequate at the right tackle spot. But maybe his pass blocking is in such a way as far as the stats go that's why he doesn't fit so much at left tackle, because he's not a good pass blocker, and that's typically your pass blocking side. So just kind of throwing those things together. Now, obviously, I'm throwing attributes into the equation, but you can easily there's a lot of traits that are behind the scenes that you don't see a whole lot involved in the game. They're either there or they're not. I'm thinking things like, catch on sidelines, uh, makes yak catches, makes rat catches, makes aggressive catches, those things. Those are all traits that are like yes or no's. You could equate that in and basically put that in and say, like, maybe the coach for a wide receiver in the slot, the coach wants somebody that can make run after the catch catches and not necessarily somebody who's an aggressive catcher. Because if you think about it, slot receivers typically going over the middle, they're going to be working in traffic. So maybe the coach values that trait more than other traits. And players that don't have that trait don't rate as highly in the scheme fit, so therefore you're less likely to put them in there, even if they are a higher overall, because they don't fit the coach's scheme, which means they don't get a benefit. And then you could work it even further by saying, say like a wide receiver lineup where you have three guys that fit their roles perfectly, you start to see chemistry and you start to see bumps in their overalls based upon the fact they're playing in the positions they want to be playing in and playing well. So like these guys are a +1. Let's see if I can make it a +3. Can I make it a +3? Let's see. I'll play around. Let's see if I can make it +3. Nope. Nope. May just suck that bad. This team is pretty bad. But here's another thing I want to show off, though. So, in this game, not only do you have positive chemistry, you can have, actually I can show on defense, you can have +3 or +5 overall, which means this current lineup that's in the middle here, this second defensive pairing, is playing like an 85 overall and an 83 overall. That's a huge thing to have these guys, these lower overall guys, play more like stars or better than stars in some cases. These guys up here, I mean, if you think about the addition, this grouping is actually better overall than this grouping, because if you do the math, 81 plus 1 is 82, 82 plus 1 is 83, 78 plus 5 is 83, so this guy and this guy are equal, and this guy's an 85, which is better than 82. So technically speaking, because of this chemistry, these guys are actually the better defensive pairings because they're higher overall. And even these guys aren't slouches down here either. They're 82 and 81 overall, respectively. And these guys are actually pretty solid third defensive pairings. They're not great. I could do better. I realize that, but don't judge my GMing in the first year. But I want to show that not only could you have positive chemistry, but you can also have negative chemistry. So a guy like this that doesn't like the first line, combined with another guy that doesn't like something on the first line, combined with another guy that doesn't like something. So you see there's a lot of X's here. The more X's you have, the more chance you have to break into that -1. It can actually go to -3 overall. So you could have a line of super studs, as far as on paper, looking like 85, 86, 87 overall players, or 90 overall players, but if you put them together and they either don't like the scheme, don't like the coach, don't like each other, just don't work well together, you can actually make them worse as a unit overall, and now they're playing down instead of playing up. And that's actually a lovely thing I like about chemistry with these lines, and all of this ties back to one simple concept of essentially matching up your coach with your players. And that's why I want to show this a good bit. I know I've been looking at players a lot, but if you look at these players, these checks and X's that you see that affect chemistry all ties down to one thing, and it ties down to the coach. So how well do they gel with the coach? So you can, and being able to fine tune these things in Madden, and like I said, this would be templates. All of this would be templates. You'd have to tinker with the templates to make it fit the sport, and I realize that. And not everything will transfer over. I understand that, but at the same time, being able to, let me come back here. All right. At the same time, being able to take these, and you could equate this to different positions and have a coach look for certain traits, or maybe not care about the trait. I mean, you could have it to where, yak catches, I'm going wide receivers because they have a lot of different attributes. Yak catches, yards after the catch. I realize yak catches is yards after catch. But yak, do they want that trait? Do they not want that trait? Do they care? So you could have it say yes. No, uncaring or balanced or whatever. Okay, and if the player has it and the coach wants it, that's a good thing. That's a boost to their chemistry on playing in that spot. And you can have it set by wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, even wide receiver 4, depending on your offense. So your offense setup and wide receivers could take that. So if you run more 3, 4 wide receiver sets, you could have a coach that basically would be like, okay, this is what I want my wide receiver 1. These are the traits I want my wide receiver 1. These are the traits and things I want my wide receiver 2 to do, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And you could do it for every position or every starting position. So that way you could just cover your starters. You could go baseline and go, your top running back, or maybe your top 2 running backs, your top quarterback, your top 2 tight ends, your top 5 offensive linemen, your top 3 or 4, depending on what type of defense you run, your defensive linemen, your top 3 or 4 linebackers, depending on what scheme you run as far as a 3-4 or 4-3. Football guys will get that. And then your secondary, your top 3 cornerbacks and your top 2 safeties, regardless of free or strong safety. So you could have those traits, and you can still tie in archetypes to that. So instead of line strategies for Madden, it would be player archetype. So at wide receiver 1, maybe I want a physical guy. Maybe my coach wants a physical guy. He wants a guy who's going to go up and get the ball. But for his wide receiver 2, he wants a deep threat. He wants a speed demon. And then maybe my third wide receiver, I want a slot guy. I want a guy that gets on the slot. Or maybe I want all 3 to be physical. I want them all to be physical. I want to have 6'5", 210-pound monstrosities coming down with footballs everywhere on the field. If that's what I want and that's what I can get, then if I get those guys, even if they're lower overall, because of my coach desires those players and wants those players, and those players fit the scheme, they get a bump in overall, and therefore will play higher than they actually list. So essentially, I can coach my players up, which is ultimately what I want out of a coaching staff, whether it's online or offline. I want these guys to maybe not strongly affect my players' overall ratings, but I want them to affect them in either a positive or negative way. I understand that there are some players that just don't mesh with certain coaches. And if I have that happen where I pick up a player that doesn't mesh with my scheme and my ideas, he should be worse in my scheme. And that makes him more valuable as trade bait to somebody else, because one man's trash, as we say, is another man's treasure. So trading off that guy that doesn't fit my scheme but maybe fits somebody else, maybe I can get somebody from them that fits my scheme that doesn't fit theirs, and now we have a mutual beneficial thing where I get a good player, you get a good player, and I make that player better because he fits my scheme, and you make my player better because he fits your scheme. Okay? And that's the things you could do with this type of setup. Would it be intensive? It might be, depending on how they set the system up. It depends on how you set the system up. But this would be a wonderful template, especially if you break it down and do it right, to allow your coaches to influence your players and influence player development. And this is with zero input from me. This is strictly a PC. The CPU has basically designed these coaches to a T. They've designed them out. Now the templates, there are usually just a few of these templates as far as the different forward lines and defensive pairings. So there's not a lot of variety. I will be the first to admit that. Okay? But there's enough variety to allow you to coach the way you want to coach for the most part. Okay? And in Madden, what I would love to see done with this, if they use a system like this, is allow us to not only create these attributes and basically assign certain attributes and make it limited as far as a brand new head coach. So make it limited. Let's say you start at D level or maybe even E level, and you get a certain number of points that you can distribute to make your player, or make your coach, how you want them. So if you want your coach to be a great offensive mind, you can pump all your, quote, bonus points into offense. If you want your guy to be a great defensive guy, you can pump them all into defense. If you want your guy to be a teacher, but maybe do a little bit of everything, but be a really good teacher, put a bunch of points into teaching, and then put just enough in offense and defense and special teams to kind of help out a little bit. And then, with that in mind, if you could create your coordinator or hire coordinators, again, using a budget that is stringently set and keeps guys from hiring the best possible coaches available to basically make their team better, even if they are a top tier user. Okay, so that kind of quells some of the fears of the commissioners that are worried that basically the ceiling will get higher, but the floor won't come up to meet it. Meaning your better players, your better users will get those better coaches, and then they will get even better as a result, whereas your guys at the bottom won't get those better coaches, and as a result will keep or fall further, and then you have a bigger gap between your top and bottom. And that's not what you want in an online league. And I think with a strict salary cap setup for the coaching staffs, and the right setup as far as making sure that they stick to a certain stringent setup as far as creating coaches, I think it could work in an online environment to where you could, and especially if you take the XP portion as far as assigning points out of players' hands. And as someone who loves control of these kinds of things, that hurts me to say it. But speaking as a former commissioner in Madden, I completely understand if they gave us this kind of system exactly like this, where we had no control except for in-game performance, how these attributes increased. I could live with it as long as I had initial control over setting up my coach as far as designing the way I wanted to. I could live with letting the game decide how I improve. And then obviously you could use like XP sliders to adjust how much experience is given to all your coaches. Is there still going to be exploits? Yes. Everybody's going to be able to find exploits and everything. But I think with this kind of system, especially when you throw teaching specialties into it, that could easily transfer over to NFL stuff, like for forwards, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, offense in general, defense in general, defensive line, linebackers, secondary. You see how that can plug in, and having different coaches, now you can kind of differentiate how you build your team. Maybe I have a defensive-minded head coach that's good with the defensive line, and my defensive coordinator is really good with secondary, but we struggle with linebackers because we don't have a good linebacker coach, or we don't have a linebacker coach at all because he doesn't give us one and just give us offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and special teams, which is what I'm anticipating with this first launch. But even with that small bit, if they gave us head coach, which that we have now technically, but offensive and defensive coordinators and special teams, if they gave us those three spots, okay, and added some things like teaching specialties and the ability for you to keep a guy from going up and down in potential. Because remember, I'm thinking about adding the entire suite of NHL ideas for franchise. So the potential we talked about in another video, with that plus this, having guys be able to go up and down in potential, or go up in potential and therefore raise their overall, therefore raise their value, this system works. It can work great, both for good and for bad, but I think it would be great for an online environment, and it would promote engagement because you would always be, now granted you wouldn't hire these guys but once every couple of years, and I know some franchises only go through 4 or 5 years in a Madden cycle, so you'd be like, well, you don't have to worry about hiring them twice. Well, yeah, you could technically, but if I have a coach that maybe isn't working out for me, if I'm engaged enough, I can go in there and go, you know what, I need to cut bait, I need to find a new guy. I'll go look in free agency for a new guy, or maybe I'll snipe him from another team and pay them more to come and coach for my guys, okay? And that creates engagement because now people are sniping off of other teams and things like that. So I think this system could work. I think it could work well, especially when you tie in adding those preferences and stuff, not only from coaches, but for players as well. When all that works together, it creates an environment where every player you have has a slightly different personality, quote unquote. Maybe not personality so much as a preference. And you take those preferences, and if you can make them mesh and work together, they get bonuses that help you game to game and can ultimately make you a winner, where if you look at them on paper, without the chemistry ads, without the coaching ads, they may be just an average team, but based on your coaching skill and based upon the chemistry you've built by getting players that fit your scheme, you play better than the sum of your parts. Okay? And that's the main thing I wanted to go over today, was just that. I know it's a long video, it's going to be a little bit to watch. The next video I do, hopefully we'll get one out tomorrow, it will be on scouting. Because scouting in this game is hugely robust, and I want to devote an entire video just to scouting, because scouting is the lifeblood for me personally. I love the draft in Madden. I don't like what it is, but I love doing the scouting, even as limited as it is. I love scouting and I love draft. I love getting new players, and that's something I'm passionate about. So I want to go in depth about the scouting in here because I'll be blunt. I love the scouting in this, especially when you do it manually. Okay, but I'm going to save all that for another video. I'm going to end this one here. If you've got any questions, comments, things like that, please leave them in the comment section below. I'll look at them. I'll respond to them as soon as I can. I hope to have a video out tomorrow. I'm going to do one tomorrow. I won't be able to do another one today, but I hope to get one out tomorrow about scouting, and it might be a long one, but I feel like it's going to be a good one, especially if Madden would, at the very least, take this one to heart, because I think this one could definitely make for an engaging experience for online users.